Well, thank you all for being here, both those who are in person and on Teams. My name is Norm Gottrin. This is the third in a series of 4 events that we're holding this fall, collaboration between the AI Institute for Societal Decision Making at Carnegie Mellon and the Carnegie Library. And just to remind you about our organization, we are one of 27 AI research institutes that are funded by NSF and its partners. And we are represented not only by Carnegie Mellon, but also by Boston Children's Hospital, Harvard University, Howard University, the MITRE Corporation, Navajo Technical University, Penn State, University of Washington, Texas A&M, and a local high school here in Pittsburgh, Winchester Thurston School. So our institute really focuses on AI and bringing AI together with the social sciences to develop human-centric AI for societal good. And we have faculty, staff, students across the institute working on different research projects. But we're also tasked with creating new educational programs. And as part of that, we've kicked off this series this semester with the Carnegie Library. So the previous talks in this series, they've introduced our audience to AI and generative AI, walked us through some of the history, and also covered the impact that AI has on society. And if you missed those talks, don't worry, we'll be posting those on the website very soon. And we know that technology is changing at an ever-increasing rate. And AI, although it does have its roots in Pittsburgh and at CMU decades ago, it really sprang onto the scene in the last couple of years with generative AI tools like ChatGPT. And this is really an exciting time. And we're in a period of incredible growth of this technology. And once again, we're seeing that innovation flows right through the city of Bridges here in Pittsburgh, PA. And if you need any proof of that, look no further than the investments that are all around us here in this area. Google, Apple, Meta have offices here. I'll point you to startups that are spun out of our great local universities. And even just in the month of October, Pittsburgh has been hosting several AI-focused events, not only a summit of the 27 national AI research institutes, but also the recent AI Horizons event in Pittsburgh, that gathered leaders in the industry, as well as an annual forum that's coming up, hosted by the Tepper School of Business at CMU for corporate entrepreneurship that will heavily feature AI technology. So AI is here, right here in our community in Pittsburgh, and today's panel really seeks to understand the impact it's having both on the economy and on the workforce in the area. And I'm joined by 3 incredible experts from the technological part of Pittsburgh here. So first we have Sean Luther. Sean is the Executive Director of Innovate PGH, a public-private partnership that accelerates Pittsburgh into a position as a global innovation city. Innovate PGH is focused on developing the Pittsburgh Innovation District, and building and supporting Pittsburgh's innovation clusters. And of course, the associated workforce opportunities. Sean has spent the past decade integrating advanced economic development, sustainability, mobility, and real estate fundamentals into urban place management. And he draws on a wealth of experience in public-private partnership. Sitting next to him is Steve Wells. Steve is the Managing Director of Software at Innovation Works. He is a serial entrepreneur and a startup executive, and he combines a deep financial background with experience leading high-growth companies across fintech, prop tech, mobile apps, and enterprise SaaS. So he definitely brings that perspective of a founder and CEO of a company that had many folks employed in the region. We also have with us Rob Cherry sitting on the end, and he is the CEO of Partner for Work, a leader in the public workforce system for Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. And in this role, he drives workforce development activities to support the region's overall economic vitality. Really looks for strategic solutions that continue growth and connect the workforce with the jobs of today and in the future. So we've got a great panel here. I've got some questions prepared for them, but I definitely want to encourage questions from the audience as well. So please feel free to jump in. To start things off, I'd like to go right down the line and ask our panelists if they could share an overview of your organization and your role within it, particularly with a focus on how your work intersects with the field of AI and its impact on workforce development and economic growth.
Good night, everyone. Sean Luther, Innovate PGH. We are a tech-based systems hub, which is a super wonky way of saying we're trying to be the air traffic controller connecting the university R&D complexes with the existing really dynamic but very independent suite of entrepreneur support organizations across Western Pennsylvania. So in general, our goal is to better translate the significant scientific and research and development capabilities at particularly Pitt and Carnegie Mellon here in Oakland, and build an economic opportunity platform for as many residents of Western Pennsylvania as possible. So my focus here tonight and in AI in general is less about what is the impact of AI on jobs and more how do we create jobs because of AI. And I think as we'll get into a little bit, but certainly if you read headlines this morning coming out of the AI Horizon Summit yesterday, Pittsburgh is technically and from an R&D perspective positioned to really win a conversation and a national job creation strategy around AI. But when you look at some of our root translation capabilities, we're not seeing the level of investment, the level of job growth, the level of new company starts that you would expect given the capabilities and the particular specializations in advanced life sciences, robotics, automation, AI, and advanced manufacturing at Pitt and Carnegie Mellon.
My name is Steve Wells. I am the managing director for the software sector at InnovationWorks. So InnovationWorks, really, the way I like to describe it is programming and support for the development and de-risking of companies so that we can then invest in them. So I think as an entrepreneur from the outside in looking at InnovationWorks, it's money. I mean, we can make active investments in companies that have that traction. I think the one thing I've enjoyed personally being on from being a founder of a company versus being on this side of things is looking at InnovationWorks as something that can help bridge that gap that Sean's talking about in terms of there are things that venture capitalists cannot invest in. IW's role really is about shepherding those companies and de-risking them to the point that private capital all over the country would be interested in that and then helping them get to that next level. So, and I think in general, to me, AI is not right now, it's in a position that a lot of other technologies prior have been, right? In terms of how do you apply that technology to do something useful for someone else and create a business out of it, a business that then creates jobs, creates tax revenue, and so forth. So InnovationWorks sits kind of in between, I would say, it's economic development and it's venture capital, in a sense, combining those two as well as possible.
Good evening, everyone. Rob Cherry, CEO of Partner for Work. Partner for Work is the workforce development board for the city and the county here in Allegheny County. Our role is to oversee the public workforce system. We do that a few different ways. One is that we oversee the career link centers, and we oversee all of the federal training dollars that come into the region where people train into CDL jobs or IT jobs, manufacturing jobs. We oversee that. The second is we interpret labor market information for the region also. And so we try and have our finger on the pulse of what are the most in-demand industries in the region here, and how can we help train a career pathway folks into those. In addition to that, when it comes to AI, I mean, we are just in this position right now where things are just kind of all over the place, meaning that, not since the internet will something impact the workforce the way AI will. And so companies, people, skill sets are just at a myriad of ranges right now. I mean, I can use it for emails. I used it for email today. My company is also using it for workforce data. It will create automation in the workforce. There will be jobs created. There will be jobs lost. And the reason why that's so interesting right now is that as boomers retire out, there's going to be a lot of people outside of the workforce, right? Over the next 10 years. And that's going to mean a lot of changes for the workforce. And so with a lot less people in it, we're going to have to change and adapt and use AI the best ways we can to make sure that, businesses and companies can operate efficiently. And so it's just going to be really interesting to see how this evolves over the next 10 years, how our labor market reacts to it, and how we create opportunities and new jobs for people. And so it's just going to be such a fascinating experience that we'll all go through with AI.
Great. Yeah, it really sounds like, building off what you said, Rob, that we're on the precipice of some real incredible change here. So, with regards to how to prepare individuals for jobs in the future, anytime you have a new technology, there are examples that we can point to in history that show that this type of rapid technological innovation can widen the gap between those who have resources and those who don't. So how do we bridge that gap, and how do we ensure that we prioritize that programs, maybe in job development and job training, are accessible and effective for everybody?
Yeah, I think we start with digital literacy, and we start in the schools especially. And, we've seen, just like with internet access, is that folks who live in more disadvantaged neighborhoods don't have access the way other folks do. And we can really use our school systems to really be a bridge and a conduit to, start developing curriculum around, these skill sets that young people will need. And I think that, on the other side of that, AI is going to be something that, can actually help bridge the gap also. We're seeing trainings right now that are, AI-driven trainings with, like virtual reality that would give individuals an opportunity to train and not be on a specific work site that they may not have access to. They could do it in a classroom, and that will give opportunities to young people or people who don't have transportation or aren't close to a particular type of training facility, that they can get trained either at home or other places. And so, but I think that we really have to start with digital literacy. That is the way that this labor market will, continue to be on that path. And we have to make sure that young people have access to computers, have access to this type of technology in school, so that they're actually growing up in it, and then better prepared for the workforce when they come out of high school or school.
And I think if we can solve that actual access gap, making sure that everyone has reliable high-speed internet into their home, that they have access to a computer, AI can actually be a democratizing function to help us leapfrog some of that digital literacy. Interestingly, ironically, maybe one of the jobs most imperiled by widespread proliferation of AI technologies is computer programmers. And so if you're teaching a next generation of folks how to operate generative AI, that actually gives them a leg up when we used to be putting people into 12-month boot camps that didn't have that job security on the back end. So, there's an asterisk with everything when you're saying democratization and AI, because, there's a number of catch-alls that I think we need to unpack as we have a conversation today. But I do think this, real acceleration, a generational shift in how we're learning, how we're doing some of these jobs can be, if we put the proper constraints on and resource the folks that don't have access to these technologies now, actually more helpful than it could be hurtful.
Great. Yeah, I think it's really crucial to realize the opportunity that AI offers to folks as well. Steve, from your perspective, you're an entrepreneur, an investor, as you mentioned. You've been on kind of both sides here. What opportunities do you see for AI startups in Pittsburgh? And what challenges do they face?
Honestly, it's a good segue from the last conversation because a handful, more than I would have expected, companies who are applying. We have an open cycle right now for Alpha Lab, which is the accelerator. So lots of companies applying right now. There's a group in ed tech and a group sort of in, I would say, HR or even like workforce development. But one of the points I was gonna make, which people are trying to capitalize on in their new companies, is you have now, with even just a ChatGPT type of application, almost an infinitely patient tutor that meets you exactly where you're at, right? In almost any domain, because it understands, I would say at this point, at least most domains, maybe not on an expert level, that's what they're working on, right? But on a general level, I mean, you can get probably most of the way through college level material in any vertical. And now a lot of that ability is being sort of productized in a sense. And so we'll see where that goes. But it's really exciting from a tutor and a workforce standpoint that if you are willing to jump into AI as a user of it, even just, a ChatGPT or whatever, if you haven't, I would encourage all of you to go play with it and try to learn something from it that you've wanted to know for a while. Like I was joking with somebody, if I ever learn to code for real, it'll be because of ChatGPT. Because it's, like I said, infinitely patient. I think in terms of startups, the truth is right now, AI is already capable of generating coherent language at a marginal cost of, I don't want to say zero, right? Because all the power constraints and so forth, but it's a marginal cost of an exceptionally low bar or low amount, right? And so what is the interface to all of business in every single industry? It's language. And so now that you can produce coherent language at a fraction of the cost of what it even, any of us in here producing an email, or if you think about what is the per hour rate of the emails you sent today, right? When that drops to 10 cents instead of like maybe, I don't know, $10 even, it really opens up the opportunity for, I don't think it's so much replacement as it is augmentation. I mean, we're seeing things across I could name 7 or 8 industries where the frontline job of whatever that industry is, take something, I'm familiar with real estate, so leasing, for example. When you put an ad up on a Craigslist or something, or a job posting, the number of applications you get in is overwhelming. You can't even really sift through them. And so being able to one, provide a better experience for users, but also a better filter for your business or your property or whatever that is, there's a huge opportunity there. And we're seeing a lot of applications from startups who are trying to solve that problem. It'll be interesting to see, is it a generalized solution that is best, or is it the vertical solution, right? Like Google's a search engine, but so is Kayak, basically, right? It's just in a vertical. So for AI startups, is it going to be the ChatGPT? Probably not. That's the base level, layer technology, and then people will build on top of it. But truthfully, right now, anything that has an interface of language is open for disruption, which is what is brand new and really exciting, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I'll second the opportunity to expand my ability to code, for sure. I come from a technical background, and so I know enough to be dangerous, but using generative tools can really make a big difference for someone like me who doesn't do it every day, but it helps me get things done for sure. And I like your point about, and it's something that our previous speakers have echoed as well, of AI being a tool, right? And there's a human behind that tool. You as the human prompting the generative tool or being in the loop with an AI tool and evaluating that output, I think is so important. And that's a theme that seems to continue to come up in these conversations. So I want to target one question to Sean, and then I'll open it up here for some panel-wide questions, and certainly we'll look for those in the audience to see if we have any questions from the audience. So if you're on Teams, please do put any questions that you have in the chat. Sean, given your experience, particularly with Innovate Pittsburgh and the Pittsburgh Innovation District, what role do you see AI playing in fostering innovation and economic growth in the region, and why is that happening? Why is that poised to really have an impact here versus other places in the U.S.?
So I think we're going to see two very different things, very different opportunities in Pittsburgh. The first, kind of my actual job, you would assume, really builds off what Steve's saying is, given that AI technology was essentially invented in Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon is the #1 AI program on the planet. They're the #1 robotics program in the country. You combine that with Pitt's expertise, top 5 in NIH research dollars. We have a really strong base to potentially translate a entire technology into a commercializable economic opportunity that starts to benefit Pittsburghers either directly because you're working at a really, high growth company like a Bridge AI, which is at the forefront of how we integrate AI into healthcare and patient care. Or eventually we want these companies to grow so that if you're an accountant or you're a chef or you're an inside salesperson, that these are creating non-technical jobs for people. So that's kind of the first order opportunity that we're really focused on. The challenge is those jobs, even though that tech, that R&D is in Pittsburgh, those jobs are going right now exactly the same place that all the software jobs went and where all the robotics jobs went after that. So if you look at a top 10 listing of where the generative AI postings are right now, it's New York, San Diego, San Francisco, Austin, Dallas, Houston, and on down the road to big coastal tech hubs. And so it's really critical that Pittsburgh is making substantive investments in talent, in data infrastructure, in ethical research, and really carving out, this is our space. We want this to benefit us because the technology is physically coming from here. The part that I get really excited about is Steve and I, our organizations are both part of the big regional Build Back Better economic development challenge. And so we're actually talking to small and medium manufacturers all across Western Pennsylvania, really capitalizing on leaders in this field like Catalyst Connection. And what this $80 million federal investment in Western Pennsylvania is doing is accelerating the adoption of AI and automative technologies into small and medium manufacturers. I think we in Western Pennsylvania take it for granted, but most cities have lost this manufacturing base, and ours are still here. But many of them are hanging on by a thread. And the only way they're going to stay competitive, given global conditions, given competition in China and Mexico, and even our trade allies in Europe, is to get to lights out manufacturing. And if we can do that, we're going to preserve an entire economic sector in Pittsburgh that's really kind of our third industrial revolution benefit by using our fourth industrial revolution outputs. And I don't know anything about automating machine lines. My father-in-law's in a titanium company in Western Pennsylvania, or in Washington County. But it's given me just enough insight in our role in Build Back Better to really make me think that this could be the space that Pittsburgh uniquely carves out in that kind of second order of operation impacts. Manufacturing, yeah, particularly in small and medium manufacturers. I think there's an obvious push for big industrial scale manufacturers to be pursuing this. And what the Build Back Better program is allowing us to do is to get really customized into what other applications can we integrate automation into these, frankly, still family-owned manufacturers who are having a really hard time hiring, keeping up with some of the workforce trends that Rob is seeing and highlighting. And making sure that those businesses stay in business and stay in business in Western Pennsylvania.
Like even have lights out manufacturers, so that's the...
So this is all the asterisks on AI and automation. So the idea is if you can run a factory 24/7, you don't need the lights on because you're taking humans out of the technical and safety impacted areas, and you're moving them off the factory floor into automation administration and executive roles instead. So it's either really exciting or really dystopian, depending on which author you're reading.
Interesting. There was just one comment I was thinking of in line with that. The one thing that I've wondered, and it's something that unfortunately too currently will push entrepreneurs, people starting companies outside of Pittsburgh, is the capital, right? So you think about, how does a San Francisco or a New York City actually develop? And to be honest, a lot of what happens is that people, and we now have the base for this, is where I'm going. This is a positive message, but in San Francisco, New York, people have made enough money themselves that they become angel investors in the most risky enterprises, because an institutional, even an organization like IW, like we exist to mostly provide a continuum of funding and de-risk a business. There's certain things you can do to de-risk a business along the way. And the natural stop for a company in that portfolio is to go find someone who understands what they're doing, believes in what they're doing, and has enough money to write $200,000, $300,000, $500,000 checks into it. It cracked me up. The advice I got in San Francisco when I was trying to raise money for the company I had started was, oh, will you do family and friends? I was like, I don't have family and friends that have 500 grand to just like give me. And so these networks, a lot of people are starting businesses that clearly don't have that network. And I think what Pittsburgh needs to start doing, and this is hopefully what will help, is try to coalesce these networks. And there are folks here that do a great job of this. I'm not saying there aren't. I think in Pittsburgh, the amount of capital here doesn't match currently the talent that's here. And how do you actually make sure that that's the case? Because I believe thoroughly that that's ultimately how you then, the city itself actually benefits from this. And folks like, for example, Duolingo is a great example of this. People there early on, right, they own stock in that company. That went public. There are people here who now have enough money to angel invest. I think that's critical, because now you can, and truthfully, people, when you receive an investment, your whole pitch is, this is what I'm going to do with the money you give me, which means hiring people. In every single case, I've never seen a pitch that says, we'll take more money, we're going to hire nobody. And even with AI, that's not true, right? We're going to hire 3 developers maybe instead of 6, or we want developers who know AI, or now it's prompt engineering. Prompt engineering, if you're good at just language, right? English, that's what's so democratizing about AI right now, is that you can just be good at language, and now all of a sudden you're an engineer because it can write the code for you. You don't have to worry about it. So I just think that's an interesting framing for this, and I do hope that Pittsburgh as a city recognizes that, and we can make sure that those companies get off the ground.
Yeah, I think you really give some interesting insight about how this is sort of a self-feeding engine, right? And people often talk about areas like, San Francisco, New York, and how they feed off that environment, how companies are able to just, like you said, go there and go out to dinner with someone and get angel investment. And I can see how that a community like that would need to be built up. And once it is, it definitely feeds on itself.
One last thing on that, which is, I think there's also something to be said for, like, why did tech companies mostly get started in software in San Francisco instead of a place like this? It's because there's a problem density of companies who are building software run into software-related issues that then startups can solve for them. So Pittsburgh now has had a long enough history in manufacturing, clearly, in a lot of the industries we've all mentioned, but there's tech, there's manufacturing, there's giant hospital systems. There is a plethora of people who need real problems solved for them across these industries. And AI, the talent is here. How do you then connect those two to produce the solutions that produce companies that grow cities?
And just a plug for all of our partners, the Pittsburgh Life Science Alliance. They're releasing a report tomorrow that really identifies this intersection of AI and healthcare is a space that no other region has claimed. And given that we have 2 massive hospital systems here that are the largest employers in the Commonwealth, that is, I think, the problem set that we really need to attack as an ecosystem with our research partners, with our capital partners, folks like IW and their Alpha Lab Health subsidiary, I think are really well positioned to put Pittsburgh on the map for that.
If I could just add on to that, one of the reasons that healthcare is going to be, a huge challenge is because we will lose 25% of our healthcare workers over the next 10 years to retirement. And they're not just going away, they're actually going to use that same system more than, is already currently being used. And so there will have to be a automation solution. There will have to be an AI solution. There will have to be some types of solutions that come together to make sure that we can run our healthcare systems more efficiently in the future. And we are seeing that sector by sector. And so this region of Pennsylvania, this part of the country is the second oldest part of the country behind Dade County and Fort Lauderdale. And so when you talk about taking a labor market constraints and how that will match up against, artificial intelligence and automation in the future, the whole country will be looking at this region.
That's a great segue. I have a question here for the whole panel, so feel free to jump in. So we know AI's changed the nature of work. So it follows that the skills required for success in the workforce have also changed. So what changes do you see, and what are in particular the skill gaps that individuals, educational institutions would be wise to address?
I'm going to hard pass.
Yeah, thank you. I saw all eyes looking at me. And I'll go back to one is digital literacy. And we actually have to create training components around AI. I mean, there will be specific things that, that we just have to train on jobs. And I'll use just Partner for Work as an example. Steve, you gave a great example just around language. We're paying someone right now to build a prompt library. And like you said, that is an engineer now. I don't know what this guy was doing a couple years ago, but he probably wasn't doing this. But each company will be different. Each sector will be different in how they have to build skills to around AI. And there are folks working in different sectors right now who are grappling with that. They may be hiring talent right now that really have their fingers on the technology, and they might do a little better at a particular job. And so right now the thought is like, you're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job to the person who's actually using it. And so that means a lot of different things to people in many different sectors. And so, as we continue to build career pathways, as curriculum in colleges continue to be developed, you will see an integration more and more in regards to how AI kind of intersects with that. But we are seeing it in some training programs. We are using it as different organizations are all using it. I think right now the best thing companies can do to kind of just get a baseline grappling on AI in their company is to come up with a use policy for it, to put some guardrails around it so that people understand in the company how to use it, how not to use it, and what they should be using it for.
Great. Thank you. So we've talked about some ways that AI can be used to improve efficiency, productivity, but I'm curious, in your particular industries, what challenges and barriers that you and your colleagues have encountered when talking about AI adoption. I'm just wondering if there's any stories or use cases you can give us.
Yeah. Trying to think of answering your question directly. It's interesting to watch. Every company that builds a product, I think, often forgets about the distribution. Like, how do you actually get that product to people? In a lot of cases, the barrier is how do you get someone to use it? a lot of times in companies, and we see this with enterprise software a lot, you go through this whole sales cycle, you sell the person that's doing it, and then they buy it, and then no one at the company uses it. And then everybody forgets they spent money on it, and a year later, the company churns. And so I think in some ways, I would, and what I've been trying to promote inside our organization is using it. I mean, sitting down and just playing with the technology itself will get you familiar with it in a way that I think is just, it seems abstract enough that you hear about AI. You look at these, articles about the future and all these kinds of, and there's fear related to it. There's uncertainty. And I think really the best way to move forward with it is just to get as familiar as possible, use it in all kinds of different ways, like set out, a time box per week and play with it. Probably the best. I think the challenges for startups in particular, this is a little unrelated, but the challenge is actually, there's a big question of who's going to actually generate the value, the big companies or startups? And like, where does it make sense for a startup to do that, to do something with AI relative to a Google or an Apple? And that's gonna play out, over time, because they have the distribution already, and that's a big advantage. Like, for example, I mean, like Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola can make any new drink they want, and it'll be profitable, and they'll sell however many $1 billion because they have the distribution. That's similar to these huge tech companies that already have billions of users. What is the application that will transition that? And I think where it was natural where it started in terms of ChatGPT, because what I view and agree with is that really what that is equivalent to in some ways is what the graphical user interface was. It is an interface to technology that was otherwise hidden from most people, right? So we've had computers for a long time. People didn't use them because there was no graphical interface. Had a graphical interface, and then you get Apple Computer, right? So now you have that moment where the interface itself is language, which is now accessible. That's why it has been adopted faster than I think any other technology in history or something close to that. And so you'll see that continue. But so the barrier to adopting AI, I actually think, is lower than most historical technologies because it's language, and we already all have that. I think the barrier for adoption of AI is actually lower than previous technologies because it's language. So I think in a way, like, why has it been adopted faster than any other technology? Because we already have the base of what you don't have to go buy a mobile phone, for example, to download an app. It's not quite, it's just language. So the willingness to participate, I think, that's the only real barrier to its adoption. I do think, and going on a slight tangent here, I have a slightly different opinion on, there's AI. We're absolutely in some high point of how hyped this is all going to get. The businesses in general, there is the creation of a product and there is the distribution. That is like the value of a company, right? The internet was adopted so fast and to a degree that was so monumental that because it's a distribution technology, the internet, you could then deliver software across the internet for almost nothing. AI is actually a creation technology. So I think it probably has net a longer, bigger impact than people think right now, but it's going to take longer than people expect to actually get all the way through that. The internet was more of a network effect where you had like a telecom, it's more useful the more people that are on it. And so that accelerates an adoption curve. AI is going to be more linear, I think, could be wrong, but have a bigger impact potentially economically than the internet.
So I'll go all the way to the other end of that spectrum, and now I wish I'd gone first. So at the end of the day, I run a nonprofit organization, and I manage people, and I have peers who do the same. And I think what's been really interesting from just an HR executive director perspective in a lot of these small nonprofits is elder millennial, or whatever I am these days, Gen X, boomer EDs, finding out that their employees are using generative AI to accomplish tasks. And I feel like we've been talking about this for 2 years now, but it was esoteric until I had an executive director call me and ask what they should do when they found out that one of their employees used ChatGPT to write an event flyer. And like that is a substantive thing for this executive director. I paid this person to do work, and they turned around and just had it automated and didn't use that creative process to do it. And that seems trite. We're in a library. Like, how quickly could you write some of these books? Like, where is the line with that? And I was very surprised that it had that level of kind of day-to-day impact on, thinking about how to manage people. What is your role and responsibility? And I think a real generational shift already of when is it okay to use generative AI tools? When is it kind of a management assist versus when are you using it to do your core job? I have an employee who's a superhuman, and he's bragging every day about being at inbox zero. I would love to be at inbox zero. I do not trust that AI is going to get through my currently 74 unread emails in a way that I think is going to put me in a better position. My employees, like, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Someone will just follow up on a nonsense email they get sent. So I think that speaks, Steve, to your a little bit, that long, high impact trend. And we may not necessarily be seeing it at real deployment yet.
Excuse me.
It's just so it was interesting because he's talking about that, like, superhuman, right? It's a specific email application. I just pitched the entire, like, all of our inner organization, like, hey, I use it, and that's exactly the point. It goes to inbox zero. Not everything's perfect, but I can write emails significantly faster, right? And it's sort of that's where it is interesting. And Rob had mentioned, the policy, and having been most of my life, I started my career at a giant bank. So that was one, sort of framework that you had to operate in. Otherwise, I've been at very small entities where whatever you needed to do to get the job done was on the table, right? And what's interesting now, sort of being back a part of an organization, is it is going to be a challenge for larger organizations to figure out what to do. And I'm hopeful that all the startups will just do it. They're going to do it. By the time the organizations figure out how to structure it, hopefully the work will get done. And so that's where, like, I'm optimistic about startups actually having an opportunity, because I completely understand if you're Google or if you're Wells Fargo, you can't really just, like, you can't just say, do whatever, use whatever you want. You send one wrong email at a place like that, and it's disastrous. And so I think that presents an opportunity for companies in Pittsburgh, the startups using this type of technology to actually make it, as opposed to be crushed by these huge companies.
You bring up a really good point. And so one of the barriers is going to be trust. And for really good reasons, because before we had these interfaces like ChatGPT, we would hear about, where does AI get its information from, and how does it make that decision? And it makes it off past decisions. Well, what if those decisions aren't the best decisions? And so I'll give you an example. When COVID hit, I was in Wisconsin running the State Department of Workforce Development. We had monumental UI claims. We had to stand up call centers. We had to use vendors. We had tens of thousands of calls coming every day. We had to complete claims. Computer systems were being crashed all over the country because of the amount of claims that were coming through, and we needed a solution to clear claims. And so we used a machine learning model to clear claims, and it helped us tremendously. Wisconsin cleared claims a lot faster than a lot of states, but it used our own decision making. And so if we had previously had a system that most of our claims had denials to Black and brown people, guess what that machine learning was going to do? It's going to do the same thing. And so what we had happen was more adjudication cases go into more adjudication cases for Black and brown people went into denials. And so we cleared out a lot of claims, but it also did the same thing that we had to learn our models, and that's what our models had done. And so it perpetuated that. And so that trust is going to be something that is going to be the barrier. You gave me the answer, but where did you get the answer from? And where's the information that you got the answer from? And, I think that'll always, to some degree, at least in the short term, be in people's mind. And like Steve said, when it makes that mistake, how do we recover and get through that and understand that it's not a perfect science. In regards to that, we have to keep evolving it, innovating, this technology to make it smarter, to make it better.
So that's a great segue into a question that's come in on the chat regarding mitigation of risk and how that affects trust and ultimately outcomes. So what mitigations can companies, especially startups who might be resource limited, put in place to prevent hallucinations from causing harm in mission critical applications? So we talked a little bit in the previous sessions about what hallucinations are, but can you give any insight on that question?
Can you give any insight into that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Insight TBD. An opinion? Sure.
I think insight's an opinion. Yeah, you're good.
So I think because the risk for organizations in that area is so much greater, they also have bigger budgets to spend on tooling. And so if you want to sell to a company like that, you have to have put in, or at least you have to be at the top of the field in terms of what your policies are regarding those decisions. So I think there's a real natural, even economic incentive to make sure that happens, because companies know the result. Like if that's the case, I mean, lawsuits and all press and the horrible treatment of people, it's just like not something anyone's interested in doing. So I do think there's a little bit of an economic guardrail there. I think my hope in looking at the models, how they're built, in a way that computer processing power was getting significantly faster and Moore's law, I think what will be interesting to see is that over time I would expect the hallucination rate to go on an exponential decline because there is such an incentive there. The problem that we do have is the one Rob brought up, which is all the historical. This technology doesn't have morality. Like, it's being infused with what ours is or was, and that's part of the problem. And that I wish all the data could be trained on, your perfect self in 30 years, and we've got society all figured out, right? Let's use that data to train today's AI. We can't. And so I think that's where, and also if anyone listening has sort of heard the, AGI and all these claims, this is based on historical data, right? It's not anything other than that. It's just really interesting because it produces language so well. And most of the world sort of runs now on a language that is Python, Ruby, these computer languages. So it's very good at producing those things. But anyway, that's my...
Well, and I think that sets up, since I didn't have a technical answer, and really I just wanted to talk about ethics around data, which I'm also not an expert on. What worries me is that to rapidly fix the large language models answering for themselves and hallucinating, as people are going to dump more and more data into the model. And so we're going to get from ideally really good unbiased data, and then we're going to go, okay, well, we need more data, and it's not, has that implicit bias in it. And frankly, I think what we've seen at a societal level in Pittsburgh, where a lot of these technologies have been rolled out in their, early testing phase of this is going to be really great for a city like Pittsburgh at a civic application, is that those implicit biases are already cooked into the data, as Rob was saying. These are data sets that were designed by people who look like me, and unfortunately we're probably 20 years younger. And so all the things that come with that kind of really narrow focus on, I just have to get to the end state, exists in a lot of these models. And we saw that in terms of, not detecting all skin colors, and particularly not detecting, Black Americans on cameras, and falsely calling police, and all these things that got rolled out really quickly here in Pittsburgh. And as a result, as much as I think where everyone's concerned about this, it's an exciting role for Pittsburgh to play, to be at the center of the ethical conversation about how we deploy and make these technologies work for more people more effectively and more equally. And so while we're going to continue hearing about Texas and, the Venn diagram of AI in the defense industry, we're going to continue hearing about how fast can you monetize AI out of San Francisco. At the end of the day, Pittsburgh does hard really well, and it does technology from a basis of improving the human experience. And I'm hopeful, and I think we've seen our early companies and folks that IW and others are investing in have that in their ethos. And so I think that's going to continue to be Pittsburgh's calling card as we transition kind of really into this AI-backed startup ecosystem.
100%. I have some more. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, please. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, please.
Okay, well, actually get excited about, work out the week more, because, what's the way out there, so getting the good practice and helping you, that's what brings my to the plays, doing what, it's really what the done, the learning time, which is other food you in the industry, what, so, that's what I'm like, what, came up later back, that constant was the, and discrimination, lack a lot of isolation, documentation, things like that. Okay, AI knows who are maybe let it, like in one because do digital, all said, blowing out, carry place to bed.
So for our team's viewers, the question is around what can AI do to help improve labor practices?
That's when it says on the guy, or human trafficking,
particularly human trafficking.
on the collaboration. Where can they publish a page? Familiar with Senator Dollars, one more, which also is to miracle, which are dollars to be to, so we hope that they bring no matter. So thanks the question is, how soon can AI literally buy and got it?
So I definitely don't have a specific answer to that, but I think I'll replicate now something that I've just learned from Steve. I think if we think of AI as a tool, we put that in the hands of folks who are passionate and in a position to combat illegal labor practices and human trafficking, then it can be a tool for the better. Similarly, depending on which author or which section of the library you're in today, it could go completely the opposite way. It could be used by nefarious individuals who can exacerbate the problem and cover their tracks more effectively and falsify documents and trick immigration and all of the worst case scenarios. And so what's terrifyingly exciting about being in 2024 is we're like at the futurists' point. And, these are going to be conversations that we live to see kind of which way is that going to go. And again, I think Pittsburgh has a really unique role to play on that of raising these really hard conversations instead of just jumping to, isn't it fun that I can get ChatGPT to come up with a dinner recipe based on, what I have in the fridge? And so I hope that, not just folks in this room, but folks in this region continue holding everyone who's involved in this conversation to account of how we do make this technology work for good, and that it does become a net benefit for society.
That's actually a very good thought to consider and think about how they both working in writing. Some people get hired in the university and get hot.
We'll ask ChatGPT what it means that I jumped to something that dark, that fast in terms of my psyche.
Any other questions from the audience? We might have time for maybe one more. Please.
I don't know what they're please, what it currently considering it sounds like almost a free wire not to go to their now. Think about these actually really having that right, so what makes the and whenever we have our photography, for example, if I want to buy cornstalk to help me edit my photo, there's even the content where tool that it kind of links in the AI, and it's like you're this template kind of guiding it, and it creates a image for you. So I'm just wondering, you think you're gonna get those people or you're gonna implement it, you're saying it's such a broad, not only explaining it, and like it. So how are we going to make it so we can show up like in the talk about?
Right. So the question, just to repeat and summarize, is kind of more about like, what is AI, and the fact that AI can refer to many different things. And how is AI different from existing technologies?
Caveat this answer one more time with like there are researchers working on all types of different aspects. I think that the best and easiest way to actually think about practically what it is, I'm sure you all are familiar with Netflix, right? And you have recommendations that come up. Similar to Google, you have search pages that come up, right? Those recommendations being good is similar to the technology that is now existing, which is we've all referred to as AI. In my opinion, and looking at all the companies that are working on what AI today is, it can produce, the new thing is that it can, those models, it's not producing a recommendation on your Netflix, it's producing a coherent, thoughtful response in language. And because language has so many applications, like that's what we're all doing all day. We're talking to other people. So anywhere that there's language, now is what is interesting, that's basically produced for almost zero cost. So how do you use AI? It's like, how do I use coherent language, right, in my day-to-day? You could probably go through your day and map out 100 different instances that you respond to somebody, whether it's a text to a friend, whether it's you Googled and read an article, whether it's like all of those things. When you produce language, think of that being able to be done now by a machine. Like that was not true. The huge test for computer science over the last 100 years was the Turing test, which it said basically like, can a human interact with a chatbot and not know it's a machine, not know it's a computer? That is now a given. Everybody can pass the Turing test. And so I guess the easiest way to think of it is, what is AI actually right now? It means that coherent language can be produced not from a human. Like that's what's different right now. And so when you can produce language at almost no cost, you can train people faster, you can do all kinds of interesting things. And like those are the applications of AI that the companies that we're looking at anyway are most focused on. It's like tutor, like anywhere you would hire a human, potentially you now have another option. And I don't want to make it sound like it's one for one. The machine still needs the guidance. But what's most interesting to me is that now it's that language piece being able to be produced at such a low cost.
All the data that is off internet and like sorts for so fast.
Yeah, it's basically a prediction machine. Actually, the way, and whoever's listening to this, if someone has a PhD, they're gonna smack me. But what it does is it predicts the next most accurate token, which think of it as a word. Like, what's the next most accurate word? And it just does that. And what it's referencing as it produces it for you is everything on the internet, truly. Mm-hmm. It needs something that it has to respond. It's not going to generate the question on its own exactly. But yes, it is producing the next most likely word.
Right.
Yeah.
There's another question back here.
I think what we have talked about so far is pretty broad, and I was just wondering what specifically is the plan for how to make this technology benefit Pittsburgh area and greater.
So the question is, how do we plan or expect the technology AI to benefit the Pittsburgh area and the Pittsburgh community?
Describing it's maybe a small set of hyper specialized jobs when it comes to people with machine learning AI space who got multi-year graduate degrees. So how are we going to make this technology something that creates jobs for people with machine in a significant way?
So I think I want to make one comment, and then I'd love to turn it over to the panel. When you think about who can use AI, it's not just those who have graduate degrees, PhDs. You can think about different levels of knowledge, whether you're a C-suite executive and you need to know strategically how to implement AI tools, whether you're an engineer, a software engineer, actually writing code and using AI, or whether you're a down-the-line worker doing day-to-day tasks. There are opportunities at each level of job for AI to have an impact. And it requires different levels of understanding and maybe familiarity with AI tools. You might need a more conversational knowledge or a more functional knowledge. If you're doing more repetitive tasks, you might need a more technical knowledge if you're a coder, et cetera. But I think there's a place for it no matter where you are, where you fall on the spectrum here.
It's powerful to use, as you're saying, but everyone can use it. It's how is it doing to get the picture more rough?
Yeah, I promise I'll give the mic up. Yeah, from my perspective, how does it benefit Pittsburgh?
Mm-hmm.
We need to invest so that the companies that deliver powerful AI solutions are built here. And when you build a company, right, you have every department that you can imagine, every job function that you can imagine. So ultimately, it's where are the companies going to be built that deliver these broadly applicable solutions? And yes, there's a lot of remote work. There's a lot of things to consider there. But from my perspective, it's invest in companies that are building really useful tools, which you can just think of now as software. Like build useful software that solves someone's problem and do it in Pittsburgh. And we'll invest in that company and ideally grow that company here so that the HR executive or the sales executive move to Pittsburgh or they're homegrown. They're from Pittsburgh. So that view might be a little bit limited, but from my perspective, it's growing companies here is what will change Pittsburgh. Like that will, providing high quality jobs and all of the things you hear about. But the way you do that is producing really interesting solutions to big problems. And so how do you do that here? Ben.
Since they're already right in that race, I mean, that thing quick. Cities, companies think there, and how is it that you're going to catch up at well?
We have CMU, we're never behind. As said the CMU employee.
Add on to that, it is absolutely, we have an anchor like CMU, number one. So when I think about like AI and the impact, going back to what Steve said, we have an opportunity here to harness, CMU and the folks who go there to build companies here. And then there's an infrastructure play that has to happen also, because these things require energy. So how can we build out our infrastructure in a way that also, because we have this anchor here, that is also like a fertile place for AI companies to come, because we're ahead on clean energy, we're ahead on, all of the things that AI companies really need to grow here. And so in addition to just building out the infrastructure for AI, there's a grid play on that, there's a clean energy play on that, there's a construction play on that. And so it could have a real multiplier effect as far as, just jobs for this region that is, exponential to what we have right now. And so AI can be a catalyst to that, if we, kind of get ahead of it the right way. But I think, no one has the anchor like CMU in the country, and we have to kind of start there. And kind of, benefit off of the technology that's coming out.
And none of the schools in the consortium are in Boston, right?
Well, no, that's not true.
So, I agree that other regions are seeing faster commercialization and job growth in AI, and particularly in generative AI. I would push back on the idea that any of that is the benefit or the outcome of a specific civic framework that says we are in Oklahoma City and we are going to win the commercialization around AI with these 20 things. I don't think any region has really leaned into that. And if they have, it hasn't been that effective because they don't have an anchor like CMU or Georgia Tech or MIT or Berkeley or any of the major AI research institutions. So I strongly agree with Rob. Like, a big piece of this is traditional infrastructure. We have to be focused on power generation. We have to be focused on pad-ready sites, and we have to be focused on developing resilient data centers, which is something we haven't seen in Pittsburgh, but given the weather trends over the past 2 weeks, really reinforces that putting these data centers and this resilient required infrastructure in the Southeast doesn't make any sense because of hurricanes. In the Southwest doesn't make any sense because it's a desert and they're going to run out of water. And this is a place that could really adopt that level of hardened infrastructure. On top of that traditional play, I think we really need to be focused around talent. And yes, that does mean more than just workforce development. That is the couple of folks who need a PhD. That is the folks with master's degree, as well as the folks who are coming out of full stack and AI-focused boot camps. We need an above all strategy to really cement Pittsburgh as a place where you can grow a company, not just because of the initial investments by folks like IW, but that you have that full growth trajectory. We need to be focused on data infrastructure. And interestingly, I think we really need to continue focusing on federally funded research centers. I mean, we obviously have some of those at CMU as well. But those seed, if you look back at the history of why Austin is Austin, why San Diego is San Diego, those are all direct beneficiaries of really technical, very specific, very wonky investments in the 80s and 90s. And we're seeing massive investments by the federal government, and we'll continue to see even as we start pulling back some of this industrial policy, particularly I think from the Defense Department and from DOE, as Rob said. And Pittsburgh needs to have a competitive narrative and a winning strategy to go out and make sure that those federal research centers are here in Western Pennsylvania.
I want to be respectful of our panelists' time. I know we're already 10 minutes over, so I was hoping maybe we could do one last closing question, maybe just 30 seconds to a minute on your final thoughts of the future of AI and its impact on the Pittsburgh region.
All right, I have the mic, so I'm less prepared. We're in a library. I'm a science fiction fan. My dog is named after Arthur C. Clarke, who was like preeminent futurist of the 50s. And what strikes me most in reading science fiction authors from the 50s is how many things they missed. They talked all about geosynchronous satellites, and they talked about, some of the technologies that we take for granted, but no one saw email coming. Everyone in the future, according to Arthur C. Clarke, is just faxing each other. That's how you get your newspaper. Like, the internet never crossed his mind. And so what I'm really excited about is the thing that we don't know yet. And that thing is probably coming out of here in Pittsburgh. It's going to be a company that ends up in Alpha Lab. We're going to be talking about it. That company's going to hire people. They're going to rely on the expertise of Partner for Work. And I really feel like we have an opportunity to cement Pittsburgh's legacy in this technology, and I don't frankly know what it looks like yet.
It's really interesting because honestly, in the same way, I think it's so hard to anticipate. Like, you can do things like extrapolate computational resources or something. You can draw some trend lines, but I do think it's unknown. I think Pittsburgh, even personally, I'm not from here. I really enjoy living here, and I think more people are going to figure that out. And then ultimately, we can get enough interesting companies going here, and we can recycle, like I was mentioning earlier, that capital that happens. I mean, it's unfortunate that it is such a small percentage of the population, right? But there are people that will actively fund out of their own bank account these new ideas, right? And whether it's the federal government, whether it's an angel investor, and you need to give somebody, like, what is so exciting is Pittsburgh is a place that can give people a real chance at building the future they're thinking of, they're dreaming of. I think this is the place to do it. And with the talent and the opportunities here, I think it's doable. So I'm excited for it.
I agree. Also not from Pittsburgh, but what I know about the history of Pittsburgh is that it has reinvented itself in the past. So it went from coal to eds and meds, and now has an opportunity to move into AI and technology. And so if there's any place in the world that can do it, it is this region right here, and it has all of the assets to do it. And interestingly enough, it also has all the problems to do it too. So all of these things are aligned here at the same time, and I think that it's going to be a very interesting and energizing kind of initiative that AI will have, on this region right here. And I think many people around the country will be watching Pittsburgh and how it reacts to this technology and what it does with it over the next 10 years at least.
Absolutely. Well, let's thank our panelists for their time this evening. Before everyone takes off, please, if you wouldn't mind completing our survey. We have a printout over there, but also there's a QR code. It's really quick, takes 5 minutes or less. And I also want to plug for our next event that's part of the series. Our final event for this season will be on November 17th, which is a Sunday in the afternoon. So we'd love to see you there for our final event. And thank you so much for coming today. And if our panelists have any time, please feel free to bounce questions off them on the way out or relay them to me. And I'd love to compile those as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Harris.